Hey, before we jump in, I'm just kind of curious. We're going to have all the pro data mesh people sit on this side, and all the anti-data mesh people sit in the way back. No. Hopefully, we've got a little bit of both. It's a topic that generates a lot of interest, a lot of discussion, and so we're going to try to give you a very neutral conversation. What I mean by that is we're going to talk about both sides. The best way to learn anything is to talk to someone who's done it. And so it's great to have Nii here from Gilead talking to us about his approach. But I think we're ready to go. Doors are closed. Nii, how you doing? Feeling good?
Good, how are you?
Ready to go? Mics are good for everybody in the room? All right, let's jump in. So before I get into the detail, I made a joke a second ago about the anti-meshers and the pro-meshers, and I find that really interesting. I think if we've been doing IT transformation for 20 years or any long period of time, this is normal, right? Every new idea has the discussions and the arguments, and that's fantastic, I think. We did this with cloud migration. We argued about the best way to get to cloud. We did this with SAP transformation. We did this with outsourcing, and so this is no different, right? A new idea comes on, what do? We talk about it, we argue about it, we learn from it. And so nothing against anybody who is still learning, nothing against anybody who's against it, and certainly willing to learn and get input from those that have actually proven it. I do want to kind of start with just some basics, right? I think when we talk data mesh, sometimes not sure what stories you may have heard or where you've kind of gotten your information already. I like to start with just some neutral positions, just to make sure that we're on the same page. And so, Nii, if you just bear with me for a second, we'll walk through this and then we'll jump into it. First thing I think that we want to understand when we talk data mesh is it's based on some pretty sound principles, right? I don't know that data mesh necessarily is an invention of a whole bunch of brand new things. It's not, right? It's built on some agile principles, which most of us are already using in our companies. This product-centric thinking, we've been doing that for a while on the business side, haven't we? Domain-oriented architectures or domain-focused architectures, yeah, sounds familiar. Whether that's worked for you or hasn't, it's something that's been around for a little bit. Federated governance, hard to do, right? But we've been trying to, at least as a CDO on the data side, we classify our data so that we can apply the right level of control and governance to it. We've been trying to do some of that as well. And so some of the core principles that a data mesh is based on, what Jamak did is take those great core principles and bring them together to allow us to kind of create a framework. They're things that are proven, right? They're not brand new, they're out there, they're already being done. The next thing, if we agree that it's based on some sound principles, then I think it's time to start focusing on the problem, right? So what problem is it trying to fix? Far too often we start thinking about, hey, mesh versus fabric. And I'll tell you what, one of the first problems that a mesh or a fabric is trying to fix is that idea of a centralized architecture. I can't get all my data in one spot. I need to try to drive a decentralized architecture. Whether you're a fabric or a mesh, some of our longest customers built a fabric with us to do or to solve exactly that problem, right? So whether you're a fabric or a mesh, that problem we have in common. How you do it technically, separate conversation. But conceptually, a decentralized architecture, a fabric and a mesh have in common. What's another problem? Another problem we're trying to solve for then is, how do I deliver to my business? What I mean by that is, I've got huge demand on my consumer side for more data. How do I keep up with it? That's a real problem. Well, what about giving them domains? How about having them work in automated teams where they're starting to work on their own, deliver more on their own? They're not relying on central IT so much. They're now actually starting to do their own things. It's a real problem, right? So again, that's where you start kind of thinking more about a data mesh. When you start designing for the consumer, when you start trying to drive this notion of self-service and automation, now you're truly in a mesh. But every mesh is different, right? I don't know, there are some data mesh people out there that would say, page 436 of the book says you should do it this way, right? The idea is you take the book and you apply the concepts in a way that makes the most sense for you. That's what Nii's done, and that's what today's presentation is focused on. All right, it is hot up here. All right, let's jump right into it. So the way that we split today's session up is really focusing on kind of the journey, and we want to kind of get through the journey, but it's important to understand the context. So without the context, some of the outcomes may not make as much sense. And so for those of us that are just starting the journey, great context. For those of us that are already there, bear with us as we kind of work through it. We want to focus more of our time today on the actual outcomes. That's where hopefully the real discussion comes out. Ready to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to what you said just now, Adrian, right? At the end of the day, whether you are adopting data warehouse, lakehouse, data lake, data fabric, data mesh, and you debate which one is the best, you all will have wrong answer without the right context. So today, hopefully, we're going to provide you with the context that we have in Gilead, the problem that we try to show, the outcome that we want to achieve, and then hopefully, right, you will understand the reason why we adopt data mesh in Gilead Sciences. So.
Perfect. All right, let's go. All right, the struggle. So what I'll do is I'll kind of tell you what I'm seeing with our customers, what I'm seeing out talking data mesh teams, and then Neil will kind of share what he's seeing over at Gilead. One of the struggles, and I already mentioned it earlier, the problem, if you will, right? The big challenge, the struggle is trying to figure out how to get my data, right? A lot of teams, their first phase in a data mesh is just trying to get to that point. And we celebrate, right? We celebrate the point when we're able to actually finally get all our data connected in one spot. That's a real struggle. Doing it, so to speak, solving it, getting people on board with it, hard to do. It's not just a technical issue, it's an organizational issue, but I think the real struggle, the starting point for most people is how do I get my data connected? That's the most common struggle, if you will, for anybody starting a data mesh journey, is I just simply am trying to find a way to get my data pushed forward. You saw the same things at Gilead.
Yep. So when I joined Gilead a year ago, and as I took over the team, here's the context that we had to deal with, right? We did not lack technical capabilities. We have almost all type of data platform in the company. We did not lack data either. We have a lot of data repository. Okay, so that was not the problem. Here's a problem that we faced with. None of the tool that we had was able to help the organization work together, right, and improve on the total cost of ownership to deliver data with quality to the organization, to make data from one domain to another domain work together. That's a problem that we are facing with, and we call that the silo problem at the company. And we will hope to achieve that, by adopting the data mesh approach.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so let's talk about case for change. The key word being business. So, I think you've heard it, I think just about every presentation that I've sat in on today and yesterday, and I love this, is that we're starting to talk more and more about business strategy. We're starting to focus more and more on business outcomes. And so this doesn't say the case for change IT challenges. This says the case for change business challenges, right? So what were your business challenges?
Yeah, so if you look across the board, right, the common theme that you have across all the business challenges that we have with the growing strategic partnership and data acquisition, right, with the growing portfolio of medicine, all of that can be summarized into two words. We need to scale, and we need to scale sustainably, right? That's a problem, right? And as I joined the company, as we started this journey, we realized that we have reached a tipping point on our scaling journey. And that's why, again, we adopt data mesh to achieve that outcomes.
Let me underscore that. Scale and scale sustainably.
Correct.
So this is...
Well, you can pump money into that and you can keep scaling forever. That's not sustainable.
You're reinventing your scale. But it's a really good point though, right? I think sometimes we've done this today, right? We invent a solution, we come up with a solution, it works really well for a short time frame, and then something else happens and we have to figure it out again, right? We did this with cloud, right? Cloud initially, we went and lifted and shifted and then realized that doesn't work. Now we have to refactor, right? So oftentimes when we build solutions, it's not just scaling for a short term, it's scaling for the future. That's important with a mesh, because in a mesh, you would say, I accept that I'm gonna have new data sources coming in tomorrow. I might acquire some, somebody else may build some, whether you call it shadow IT or something else. I accept that there's gonna be new data sources coming up. I accept that the demand for data is only going to grow. I accept that I can't grow my central IT team big enough to deliver against all that, right? So being able to scale and sustain that is really important. I think a core concept of why we head towards a mesh approach. Strategy. I really like and I know me and I were talking about the order of the pyramid, so don't go by the order, right? There's a couple of different ways to organize this, and maybe Neil, I'll ask you to talk about those and maybe the order you think they're most important. But back to the business, right? The vision and the mission, when I saw this slide, what I really was impressed by was that, again, we're talking about business outcomes. We're talking about business drivers. We're not necessarily talking about, hey, I want a faster query, or hey, I've got to figure out a better way to build a data pipeline. No, although those things are important for sure, but these are the bigger outcomes that we're trying to drive.
Yeah, so as for any new initiative, we started as a vision, right? So our vision is very simple, and this may be the common vision across the industry, right? We need to elevate a data-driven culture, and we need to treat data as assets across enterprise. So how do we do that, right? There's two things that we try to focus on. Number one, we want to focus on making that easy for the organization to create data products. And I'm stressing the word data product because that cannot be taken lightly. We're going to cover that later, right? That's number one. Number two, how do we democratize access to data across the enterprise so that even the average user in the enterprise, they can gather data, they can analyze the data at ease. And to do that, we created a 4-part strategy. And I'm not going to tell you which one is the most important because, again, that's going to be a wrong answer, right? I'm going to tell you what's the most important to Gilead within that context, okay? So with that context, the first thing that was the most important to us is on the data product strategy. And essentially what this means is you got to think about data as a product. So if you attended the keynote, the first keynote, right, I love the section where they talk about us thinking about big data as having as much data as possible, right? What's the point of spending money and effort to create data where you have no use for that data, right? So data products is a way for us to think about what is this data for and creating the data with the right attributes so they certify that outcome. So that's the most important thing, make sense of data. The second thing that we focus on is on the data platform strategy. And the reason for that is we know that creating data product is hard. And there's a lot of common denominator across different business functions on the capability that we need to create for them to create data product with low total cost of ownership. And because of that, we want to identify that common denominators, right? And then we build the self-serve data platform so that all the LB, they can leverage that and focus on delivering data products, knowing what they know best, okay? Now, the third one is organizational change. And I would assume that we're all familiar with Conway's law. And that's my favorite law in IT, right? So you got to change the organization so that the architecture would work, right? So it took a lot of effort for us, to work with different business, different departments in the organization to implement change to support this type of architectures. And last but not least, data governance. The danger of adopting the data mesh approach, enabling different LOB to create their own data products is we're going to run into a silo problem. So we're back to square one, right? But at the same time, we cannot centralize governance either. That doesn't scale. So we look at creating a federated governance model so that different LOB, they work with autonomy, but they work together under one common governance framework. So that's a strategy that we set out, Judge.
Now, there's a couple of gold nuggets there. Let me see if I can take two of them. I really like what you said about the organizational side. I had a conversation last night over dinner, an argument of sorts, right? A colleague who's not fully bought into the data mesh concepts. And so this is the way the conversation went, right? And maybe I should say this is where we ended up. We ended up with the idea is that if you're trying to implement a data mesh in your company, you shouldn't be selling it. Let me explain what I mean there. If there isn't a team in the organization who wants to work autonomously, who's willing to get in there and do some work themselves, who wants to work in a self-service way, if you don't have that interest in the organization, and it doesn't have to be across the organization. Like I would never say, go build your data mesh for everybody tomorrow. No, you start small with one domain, with one team that wants to go. That's how you do organizational transformation. But you have to have that team that's willing. If you don't have that team, then you're probably not ready for a mesh. So it's okay to say that, right? But there has to be someone willing to kind of say, yeah, I want to work autonomously, I want to work self-service. That's the first thing, one of the key things I want to underscore. The second thing is data products. Gosh, it's a topic that I think there's a lot of different ways to view a product, right? A lot of different conversations and a lot of great ways to build a data product, right? I like the way that we do it, but there's other ways to do it also, right? Snowflake builds a great data product as well. What I want you to think about when you start thinking about these data products is also consider the speed of delivery, not just the query, that's important, but what's more important is how quickly you can get it to your consumer, right? If you're having to move data all over the place to build a data product, I don't care how fast that query is, that business is waiting a week or two or a month before they actually see a result, right? The speed of delivery matters more than the speed of the query, right? So when you start thinking about building data products, you want to try to build them on a platform that's going to allow you to build them quickly and then change them quickly and then build them quickly and then change them quickly. That ideation is really important. The TCO of the data product is also important. Am I building a data product and then storing it somewhere and then paying a big team to manage it? Or am I building data products in views like we do, so to speak, right? Where you've got a lower TCO. And so think about the cost of ownership, think about the performance, but think about the delivery speed as well as the performance speed. Awesome, good. All right, let's go to the next one. So I don't know if you guys can see this. I stole this from one of these presentations. He kind of showed me a strategy, and I said, oh, I got to use it in the presentation. So I stuck it in there, and I was hoping that it would be so small that you wouldn't be able to steal any confidential information. And then I came in here and I said, oh man, it's a big screen. But I don't think anything's confidential, right, Nick?
I don't think so.
All right. But I really love the way you structured the capabilities, the strategic imperatives, and I don't want to steal your thunder, I'll let you walk through it. But to me, it's a really good way to think about not just the data mesh strategy, but your broader ecosystem strategy.
Yeah, I'm gonna start by saying this, and this is me being fairly opinionated, right? It's almost impossible for you to convince the business to adopt data mesh, thinking that they will eventually understand what data mesh is. It's almost impossible. Because even IT themselves sometimes do not fully understand data mesh, right? And it's a very early concept. So the way that we chose to approach this is the following, and this is like music to the ear of the business. We start with the business outcome, the desired business outcome that everyone agree upon, okay? And from there, we work with them to define strategic imperatives across the enterprise. And that's what you see on the second row over there, right? That everyone, again, agree upon. And from there, we build a framework across several line of business so that they can work together to produce data products and then collaborate, cross-domain, right? And we didn't really bother to, make them fully understand the concept of the product, because again, it's very hard to understand if you haven't truly, see the purpose of that, right? So we asked them to trust us, okay? And then last but not least, we created a data platform so that different line of business, they can see how they can improve on the total cost of ownership as they work on building data products, what they would use to derive insights. Okay, they use our platform, they use our capability without having to go and build that themselves. They focus on the data knowledge, the data that they know the best, the data that we IT would not be able to understand as well as the business. So,
boom, boom. All right, we've got 3 outcomes we want to focus on. And the way that we want to have the conversation, so from an audience perspective, is I want you to walk away with an understanding for what worked. Far too often we get in these data mesh conversations and we go through a bunch of detail and you walk out thinking, I'm not really sure what I learned, right? Our purpose here for the next 3 slides is try to share with you some of the things that actually worked. Call them game changers, call them capabilities, whatever you want to call them. These are things that actually made sense that ultimately helped us drive an outcome, right? And so this first one here is focused on accelerated time to insight, right? That's a fantastic business outcome. I don't think I've ever seen a data strategy in the last 3 years, including the ones that I've written, that doesn't have that, right? We're all trying to accelerate time to insight. There were some key things, some game changers that I think you saw that made this actually work. What were those?
Yeah, but I'm going to be a broken record to say this again, right? What we have over here is for Gilead, the Gilead context. So if you apply this to your company without the context, it's not going to work. And that's why IT is hard, right? So
you're too modest. You're too modest. It'll work for everybody. Don't forget what I'm just. So with the outcome to accelerate the time to insight, okay, first and foremost, the strategy imperative to us is we got to go with the cloud. Everything is built on the cloud, native cloud capability for everything. And the reason for that is very simple, right? With the cloud, it takes a lot less time for us to build and to maintain, and the cost of ownership is a lot lower. That helps us. Now, so that's the first one. Second, in terms of platform capabilities, we look across the board and we've tried to figure out what would be the most important capability in order for us to help
accelerated time to insight? Two things, right? Number one, make it easy to create data products. Number two, make it easy for the organization to access data product. And that's that, right? So for the first capability, we look at investing in a reusable ingestion framework, okay, what is used commonly across the board. There's no LLB line of business that doesn't have the need, for that data ingestion pipeline. So we build that for them. All that they need to worry about is on the configuration side, right, and the data domain side, okay? That's one. Second, I'll talk a little bit about the silo problem that we had in Gilead, right? We have data everywhere, sit in every single data warehouse, every single data lake across the board. It takes a lot of effort to bring all of those data together in one single place and integrate them. Not to mention that as you move the data, you're gonna lose the trust in that data, right? And because of that, we adopted the federated query engine so that you can query for data across a company, regardless of where the data sits. And then you end up with having one single interface for the organization to access the data, in this case via SQL, right? You have one place to enforce security control. And then let's just say, right, we are going through a transformation journey. Let's say at some point down the road, we decide to remove one of the data warehouse. That interface here is gonna always provide that abstraction layer for the end user. And let IT handle what happened behind the scene. That helped the business. So that's what we focus on.
Yeah. I want to add one thing and then we'll go to the other slide. Another thing that's really important here is agile ways of working. When you start building data products, think about building data products using an agile approach, right? Small, start fast, iterate, evolve. That's the way you should think about data products. If you want to build these big, stable, perfect data products, it's going to take forever and you're never going to get there. There's no such thing as a perfect data product. They need to evolve, they need to ideate, so to speak. Let's go to the next one, right? So now we were talking about cross-enterprise use cases and we've got about 7.5 minutes. So what were the key ones for really building use cases that worked across different parts, different verticals in Gilead? That was a big one for you, I think, wasn't it?
I would say that's the most that's the most difficult challenge. It's the hardest, not to crack in any organization. Okay, because data normally across domain, they don't work well together, right? But we took on that challenge. And we want to build the data democratization across the company so that everyone across the company can have access to data regardless of where it sits, right? And this is our way of getting out the silo problem that we had, okay? Now, in terms of platform capability, I'll talk about the federated query engine. I'm not gonna talk about that again, but I wanna call out the enterprise master data management. Yeah. That's the way for us to make data across domain to work together. And here's one more thing, right? When we talk about the MDM, you cannot talk without data governance, right? Governance can happen first, and then MDM happen later. But if MDM happen first and then governance, you would never succeed. I guarantee you would never succeed. And that's why data governance is now the important initiative that we're driving as well in parallel with the MDM. So.
I'll add one more piece of this real quick. When you start thinking about sharing products across domains, don't make that one of your early quick wins. It doesn't happen that quickly, right? What you want to focus on early on is getting your domains individually to build good data products. What'll happen when they start building good data products and they start sharing them in a catalog is others will see them, and that sharing almost happens organically, right? That's the way you want it to work. If you're trying to force a share and you do it too early, the other team's gonna say, they're building terrible data products, right? So you want to kind of let them start to build slowly, let them improve, and when they start to see good data products, that sharing will come. All right. Somebody talking back there. All right, so data literacy, fantastic, really important one.
Last but not least.
Last one, yeah.
Okay.
So last one, yeah.
So everything that we do, everything that we've done so far, at the end of the day, our ultimate outcome, right, is to help improve the data literacy across the organization, right? And hopefully through that, we can promote the adoption of analytic and advanced analytic with the data that we have. That's our outcomes. Now, in order for us to do that, right, we create a program to enable the organization across the line of business to make decisions with data, okay?
Yeah.
How do we support that? Number one, data catalog. Okay, we got to have an enterprise data catalog. And I want to zoom into this data catalog a little bit. I would say 30 to 40% of that has to do with technical capability. Okay, it's easy for us to go out there, work with one vendor, get a piece of technology in, and it's not that hard to build the integration of that technology with all of the data storage that you have. That's easy, 30 to 40% effort. The harder part of that, is to make sure that you have the right information about the data, the right metadata, right? And as we all know, technical metadata, business metadata, operational metadata, right? In that catalog, and make the data discoverable by the organization. Now, the way that we implement data catalog in Gilead is a bit different. We organize data not based on data assets. We organize data based on data products, okay? And just now I said, the word data product, it cannot be taken lightly. In order for a piece of data to be classified as a data product, right, it must be addressable, right? It must be usable. It must be self-describing. It must be secure, right? It must work with other data products across another domain, right? All of that, and to achieve all of that is not simple. Now, I'm going to end on the data catalog with one statement. It's almost impossible for the organization, for the business, to create a perfect data product with all the required information. It never happened, right? So we got to accept, when is enough, and work with the business to build that catalog incrementally. That's the way that we implement that in Gilead, and we have seen, some success so far. And we receive less resistance from the business because we got to work with them, right? We got to make it easy for them. Now, the last component that I want to call out as a platform capability is the self-service and exploration. And when I talk about the self-service, right, we talk about usability, we're talking about making that easy for the organization to adopt the platform. There's no other better way than making that self-service. And when I talk about self-service, I'm talking about the end-to-end layer, right? Meaning start from the business user needing to get access to the data and build dashboard, build insight. That needs to be self-service. If they had to go to a dashboard engineering team to ask for that, that's not self-service. That's slow. That's one, right? I'm talking about the ability to go into a portal, discover data, request for access to data, understanding the data without talking to anyone at all. That's a self-service. I'm talking about the data engineer who need to build data product. They can use the platform capability to produce their data product using their domain knowledge without talking to the platform team. That is self-service. And last but not least, I'm talking about the ability to provision the infrastructure by themselves using our service catalog, right? Looking at the product, and they would have the environment for them to work with without, again, talking to engineering team. That is self-service. So that's what we are focusing on, because that's the way for us to prove to the business how valuable the platform is, how useful we are to them, how we can help them, right, reducing the total cost of ownership. So,
beautiful. What Gilead's done is impressive. I know we just kind of scratched the surface. There were, I think if you saw that previous slide, I think there were probably 9 or 10 big outcomes they were driving. We tried to focus on the 3 that we thought would resonate the most with a broader audience. But thank you so much. Whether you're building data mesh or whether you're presenting at Gartner, having a good partner is really important. So Gilead, thanks for being a good partner.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the information. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, everyone.